"Mom, starting with your next paycheck, we're transferring all your money to my account." Those were the words my son Trevor spoke to me that Thursday afternoon while drinking coffee in my kitchen. He said it as if he were proposing something completely normal, as if he were doing me a favor, as if I were incapable of managing my own money at 60 years old. I stared at him. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I just searched his eyes for an explanation. Why my own son, the boy I raised alone in Charleston after his father left, the man I fed with the sweat of my brow, was asking for total access to my bank account. But I found nothing. I only saw that calm smile, that confidence of a person who knows he's in control. Real quick before I tell you what happened next, subscribe if you haven't already. I want to know where you're watching from, especially if you've ever had your own children try to control your finances. If you've ever been treated like you're incompetent by the family you sacrificed everything to raise. If you've worked 2 jobs for 30 years so your child could have opportunities you never had, only to have them treat you like a burden they need to manage. This is how a 60-year-old mother in Charleston, South Carolina, taught her son that financial abuse has consequences, and that the woman who survived poverty and a broken marriage knows exactly how to protect herself. It's about remembering who worked double shifts so you could go to college, who gave up on rebuilding her life after your father abandoned you at 2 years old because she didn't want you growing up with a stepfather, who lived in small apartments and wore old clothes so you could have everything you needed. Let me back up, give you the whole picture. So I took a deep breath and told Trevor, yes, that it seemed fine, that I trusted him. Trevor's smile widened. He stood up, gave me a quick mechanical kiss on the forehead, one of those kisses that mean nothing, and told me it was for the best. He said I wouldn't have to worry about a thing, that he'd take care of everything, that it was for my own good. Those words, "for my own good," floated in the air long after he'd left my house. That very evening, like every Friday, Trevor came back. Not alone, but with his wife Vanessa, just as he always did. He arrived expecting me to have dinner ready, the table set, hot and free food waiting for them, as had been the routine every Friday for the past 3 years. I heard them arrive. I heard their footsteps at the entrance. I heard the key I'd given him turning in the lock. I heard the door open. And then I heard the scream. It was a high-pitched, desperate sound. The scream of someone who'd just seen something they never expected to see. The cry of someone realizing things weren't going to be the way they thought. I remained seated in my chair in the empty kitchen in the empty house, listening to that scream echo against the walls. I didn't move. I didn't go to see what was happening. I already knew what was happening. Trevor rushed into the kitchen. His face was pale, his eyes wide open. Vanessa followed him with the same expression of shock and disbelief. "Mom!" Trevor yelled. "Mom, what did you do? Where is everything? Where's the furniture? Where's the TV? Where is everything that was here?" I looked at him calmly with a self-possession I didn't know I had. I told him in the softest voice I could find that I had sold a few things, that I needed the cash. After all, if he was going to handle my finances, I needed to make sure I had some money on hand first. His face changed from pale to red, with pure fury. He took a step toward me, and for the first time in my life, I saw my son for what he truly was. Not the boy I had raised, not the young man I had helped build his life, but a stranger. Someone who looked at me with contempt, with rage, with something that dangerously resembled hate. "You're crazy," he snapped. "You are completely out of your mind. How could you sell things without consulting me? How are we supposed to watch TV when we come over? How are we going to be comfortable here?" That last sentence changed everything. How are we going to be comfortable here? Not how are you going to be comfortable, Mom. He wasn't worried about how this affected me, but about how they would be comfortable. As if my house were an extension of theirs. As if my possessions existed for their convenience. Vanessa stepped closer. She looked at me with those eyes that always seemed cold and calculating, and said something I will never forget. She said I was being selfish, that I was only thinking about myself, that they came every week to keep me company, to make sure I was doing well, and this was how I repaid them. Selfish. Me, the woman who had worked double shifts for years so Trevor could go to college. The woman who had given up on rebuilding her life after Michael abandoned us because she didn't want her son to grow up with a stepfather. The woman who had lived in small apartments in North Charleston, worn old clothes and eaten the bare minimum so he could have everything he needed. Selfish. Trevor stood there looking at me as if I were a problem he needed to solve. And then he said something that broke me in two. He said maybe it had been a mistake to propose the bank account transfer, that maybe I wasn't in any condition to make good decisions, that perhaps I needed more help than he thought. More help? As if I were a burden. An incapable elderly woman who needed to be controlled. I stood up from my chair. I looked at both of them and told them in a voice that came out louder than I expected that dinner was not ready, that there was no dinner, and that if they were hungry, they could go eat somewhere else. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Trevor stared at me as if he couldn't believe what he just heard. Vanessa let out a dry, bitter laugh and mumbled something about respect and gratitude. And then Trevor spoke the final line, the one I still hear in my head when I close my eyes at night. He said with a coldness I'd never known him to possess that I should be careful. A woman my age, alone without family who truly cared about her, could end up in a bad way. He said he was the only thing I had, and I should remember that before doing anything stupid. They left. They stormed out of my house, slamming doors, leaving a trail of rage and veiled threats. I heard them get into the car, heard the engine start, and listened as they drove away. I stood there in my empty kitchen, in my empty house, feeling something inside me permanently shatter. But it wasn't sadness I felt, it wasn't desperation, it was something different. It was clarity. It was the absolute certainty that my son didn't love me, that perhaps he never had, that I was just a resource to him, a source of money, food, and convenience. I sat back down in my chair. I looked at the bare walls of my living room. I looked at the empty spaces where furniture I'd bought with my labor and effort once stood. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. Because Trevor didn't know something. He didn't know I hadn't sold the furniture for money. I had sold it to send a message. To see how he would react. To confirm what I already suspected deep down in my heart. And he had reacted exactly as I expected. With rage. With indignation. With the attitude of someone who feels entitled to another person's things. That night, as I sat in the darkness of my empty house, I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to do something much more powerful. I was going to observe. I was going to wait. I was going to let Trevor believe he had won. And then, when he least expected it, when he was most confident, most sure of his control over me, I was going to show him who Diane Hudson truly was. Not the submissive mother he thought he knew, but the woman who had survived a broken marriage, poverty, and grueling hard work in Charleston. The woman who knew exactly how to protect herself. The woman he should never have underestimated. There was a time when I believed being a mother was enough, that the love I gave would be naturally returned, as if it were a universal law that the sacrifices I made every day would build something solid, something unbreakable between my son and me. How wrong I was. Trevor was born on a stormy night 32 years ago. His father, Michael, the man who had promised me a life together, left when the boy was barely 2 years old. I remember the day Michael walked out. It was a Tuesday morning. He said he wasn't ready for the responsibility, that he felt trapped, that he needed to find himself. He never came back. Never sent child support. Never called to check on his son. Just disappeared like he'd never existed. I was 28 years old, alone in Charleston with a toddler and no college degree. I worked as a housekeeper at the Francis Marion Hotel during the day and cleaned offices at night. 2 jobs, sometimes 3 when I could find weekend work. I did this for years, for decades. While Trevor grew up, while he went to school, while he made friends whose parents had normal jobs and normal houses and normal lives, I saw the way he looked at other kids' families. The shame in his eyes when he had to explain that his mother cleaned hotels for a living. The embarrassment when I showed up to school events in my work uniform because I didn't have time to go home and change. But I kept going. I kept working. I kept sacrificing. Because I believed that love and effort would be enough. That one day when he was older he would understand, he would appreciate, he would be grateful. Instead, he learned to see me as less than, as someone whose work was menial, whose struggles were shameful, whose very existence was something to be hidden. Trevor went to the College of Charleston on scholarships I helped him apply for. I was so proud. My son, the first in our family to go to college. I worked extra shifts to help with his expenses, to make sure he could focus on his studies instead of working. He graduated with a business degree. Got a job at a marketing firm. Met Vanessa, who came from a family with money, with connections, with the kind of background Trevor had always wished he had. They got married 5 years ago. A small wedding that I paid for, even though Vanessa's parents could have easily afforded it. I spent $8,000 I didn't have because Trevor asked me to, because he said it was important to him. Vanessa never liked me. I could see it in her eyes from the first time we met. The way she looked at my small house, my old car, my work-worn hands. The way she smiled politely but never warmly. The way she always had an excuse when I invited them over until they started the Friday dinner routine 3 years ago. At first I was happy about those Friday dinners. I thought it meant they wanted to spend time with me, that Trevor was making an effort to include me in his life, but slowly I realized the truth. They came because it was free food, because Vanessa didn't like to cook, because it was convenient for them. They never asked about my day, never asked about my work, never brought anything to contribute to the meal. Just showed up, ate, and left, and the requests started, small at first. Could I lend Trevor $500 for a car repair? Could I help with $1,000 for a security deposit on a new apartment? Could I co-sign a loan? I said yes every time, because he was my son. Because I wanted to help. Because I thought that's what mothers did. But the money never came back. The promises to repay me were forgotten, and the requests kept coming, getting bigger, more frequent, more demanding. Until Thursday afternoon, when Trevor sat in my kitchen and told me he wanted access to all my money. Not to borrow it, to control it, to manage it, to take it. For my own good, he said. The weekend after they stormed out of my house passed in eerie silence. No calls from Trevor, no angry texts, no demands or threats, just silence. I used that time to think, to plan, to remember things I'd been trying to ignore for years. On Monday morning, I went to First Community Bank on King Street, a different bank from the one where I'd kept my accounts for 20 years. The same bank where Trevor had access to my information because I'd added him as an authorized user years ago when I thought it would be helpful in case of emergencies. The woman who helped me was named Sarah. She was probably in her 40s, professional but warm with kind eyes that reminded me of Mrs. Bertha, my neighbor. I need to open a new account, I told her, and I need to transfer all my money from my old bank. Sarah nodded, pulled up the paperwork, and started the process. But then she paused, looking at something on her screen. Mrs. Hudson, I'm seeing some unusual activity on your old account. Multiple withdrawals over the past 6 months, large amounts. Were you aware of these? My heart stopped. What do you mean? Sarah turned the screen toward me. I saw the numbers. $500 here, $800 there, $1, $200, $2,000. Withdrawals I never made. Transfers I never authorized. This one here, Sarah pointed to a transfer from 3 months ago. $3,500, transferred to an account ending in 7,834. Do you recognize that account? I didn't, but I knew whose account it probably was. How much? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How much total? Sarah calculated quickly. From what I can see in the past 6 months alone, approximately $17,000. The room spun. $17,000. Money I'd earned cleaning hotel rooms and office buildings. Money I'd saved for emergencies, for my future, for the security I'd never had. Gone. There's more, Sarah said gently. I'm seeing inquiries on your credit report. Someone has been checking your credit, and there are 2 credit card accounts opened in your name within the last year. Were you aware of these? No. The word came out flat dead. I didn't open any credit cards. Sarah's expression shifted from concern to something more serious. Mrs. Hudson, this looks like identity theft, possibly by someone with access to your personal information. Do you have any idea who might have done this? I knew exactly who had done this. The son I'd given everything to. The son who had a key to my house, access to my documents, knowledge of my social security number and date of birth. Trevor, what do I do? I asked. Sarah leaned forward. First, we secure your accounts here. New account, new passwords, new security questions. Then we need to pull your full credit report and see the extent of the damage. And Mrs. Hudson, I'm going to be honest with you. If this is what I think it is, you're going to need to file a police report. This is a crime. We spent the next 2 hours going through everything. The credit report showed 2 credit cards opened in my name. One with a balance of $12,000, another with $11,000, both maxed out, both delinquent on payments. $23.00 credit card debt I didn't know existed. Combined with the $17,000 stolen from my account, my son had taken $40,000 from me. $40,000 earned through years of backbreaking work. Sarah helped me freeze my credit. We filed fraud reports with all 3 credit bureaus. She gave me the number for a lawyer who specialized in elder financial abuse. "This happens more often than you'd think," Sarah said quietly as we finished the paperwork. "Family members who think they're entitled to their parents' money, who justify it because they believe the money will eventually be theirs anyway. But Mrs. Hudson, this is theft, this is fraud, and you have every right to protect yourself." I left the bank with a folder full of documents, a new account number, and a clarity that felt like ice in my veins. That evening, I called the lawyer Sarah had recommended. His name was Miron Chung, and he agreed to meet with me the next day. Trevor called that night. His voice was different, softer, almost apologetic. "Mom, I think we overreacted on Friday. Vanessa and I have been talking and we want to apologize. Can we come over tomorrow? Maybe talk about everything? Tomorrow isn't good for me," I said calmly. "Oh. Okay. Well, when would be good? I'll let you know." "Mom, about the bank account transfer, we don't have to do it right away. We can wait until you're ready. I just want what's best for you." The lies came so easily to him, the manipulation so smooth. "I appreciate that, Trevor. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk." I hung up before he could say anything else. The next morning I met with Miron Chung in his office on Broad Street. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 52s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I laid out everything. The demand for account access. The furniture I'd sold to test Trevor's reaction. The threats. And then the discovery at the bank. The stolen $17,000. The fraudulent credit cards. The $40,000 total. Miron listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he looked up at me. "Mrs. Hudson, what do you want to happen here, because you have options? We can pursue civil action to recover the money. We can file a police report for identity theft and fraud, which could result in criminal charges, or we can do both. What would you recommend? Both? This isn't just about money. This is about someone who tried to financially abuse you, who stole from you, who committed fraud using your identity, someone who would have continued if you hadn't caught it. That person needs to face consequences. Even if that person is my son," Miron's expression softened slightly, "especially if that person is your son, because he knew better, he knew what he was doing, and he counted on you being too afraid or too guilty to stop him." I hired Miron Chung that day. We filed a civil lawsuit against Trevor for the $17,000 stolen from my account plus damages, and I filed a police report for identity theft and credit card fraud. The hardest part wasn't making the decision. It was accepting what it meant. That I was taking legal action against my own son. That I was choosing myself over him. That I was saying no to decades of conditioning that told me a mother's job was to sacrifice, endure, and forgive. But I did it anyway. The police detective assigned to my case was a woman named Detective Richards. She was probably in her late 30s, with a kind but serious manner. "Mrs. Hudson, I want you to understand something," she said during our first meeting. "Financial abuse by family members is one of the most underreported crimes. Most victims don't press charges because of guilt, shame, or fear of losing the relationship. But what your son did is a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. What happens next? We investigate. We subpoena bank records, credit card statements, any documentation that shows he accessed your accounts and opened credit in your name without authorization. With the evidence you've already gathered, we have a strong case." Trevor found out about the lawsuit 3 days later when he was served with papers at his office. He called me immediately, his voice shaking with rage. "What the hell did you do? You're suing me. You filed a police report. Are you insane? I'm protecting myself," I said calmly. "Protecting yourself from your own son? I can't believe you'd do this to me, to our family. You stole $17,000 from my bank account, Trevor. You opened credit cards in my name without my permission. You racked up $23,000 debt that I'm responsible for. What did you think would happen? I didn't steal anything. That money was it, he stumbled over his words. I was going to pay it back. I had investments, things that didn't work out. I just needed time. You had 6 months. You took money every few weeks for 6 months and never told me. That's not borrowing, Trevor. That's theft. How could you do this? I'm your son, your only child. You're going to destroy my life over money. No, I said quietly. You're going to face consequences for your choices. There's a difference. He hung up. Within an hour, I received a text from Vanessa. I hope you're happy. Trevor might lose his job over this. We could lose our apartment. All because you're being vindictive and bitter. You're a terrible mother. I blocked her number. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings. Myron filed for an emergency freeze on any accounts Trevor had tried to hide. The police investigation uncovered even more evidence. Forged signatures on bank withdrawal slips. Documentation showing Trevor had logged into my online banking using my credentials. And the credit card statements. Pages and pages of charges, expensive dinners, electronics, clothes. Vanessa's name on many of the receipts. They'd been living well on my stolen money while I worked 2 jobs and lived in a modest house. Myron was methodical, thorough, relentless. We're not just going for recovery, he told me. We're going for damages, legal fees, and a public record that will follow him. Financial abuse needs consequences, or it continues. Trevor tried to reach me multiple times. Calls I didn't answer. Emails I didn't read. He showed up at my house once, but I didn't open the door. I'd changed the locks the day after I filed the lawsuit. He left a note under my door. It said he was sorry that he'd made mistakes, that he needed help, that he'd pay everything back if I just dropped the charges. But the words felt hollow, empty. The kind of apology someone gives when they're caught, not when they're genuinely remorseful. Mrs. Bertha came over one evening with a casserole and concern written all over her face. Diane, honey, the whole neighborhood is talking. Is it true what they're saying about Trevor? It's true, I said simply. Lord have mercy. She sat down heavily in one of the few chairs I still owned. I never would have thought. That boy always seemed so polite, so put together. Appearances can be deceiving. What are you going to do? I'm going to see this through. Whatever happens, happens. Mrs. Bertha reached across and took my hand. You're braver than you know. Most women in your position would just accept it. Would convince themselves it's not that bad. Would sacrifice themselves again and again because that's what we're taught to do. I'm tired of sacrificing, I said. I've been doing it for 32 years. And where did it get me? A son who sees me as an ATM machine. A daughter-in-law who calls me bitter. $40, 0 inches, theft and fraud. You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Bertha said firmly. Don't you let anyone tell you different. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after I filed the lawsuit. Myron prepared me for what to expect. Trevor would have lawyers. They would try to paint me as a vindictive mother, as someone with memory problems, as someone who'd given Trevor permission to access the accounts. Let them try, Myron said. We have documented evidence. Bank records don't lie. Credit card applications with forged signatures don't lie. The truth is on our side. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Trevor as a baby, as a little boy who'd cried when I left for work. As a teenager who'd hugged me tight after his first heartbreak. Where had that boy gone, or had he ever really existed? Had I created a fantasy son in my mind, seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was really there? I didn't know anymore, and maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that the woman I was now at 60 years old was finally choosing herself, was finally saying that her dignity, her security, her life had value beyond what she could give to others. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Plain walls, fluorescent lights, rows of wooden benches. Trevor sat at a table with 2 lawyers in expensive suits, looking pale and nervous. Vanessa sat behind him in the gallery, her face tight with anger. I sat with Myron at our table. I'd worn my best dress, the navy blue one I saved for special occasions. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept them folded in my lap. The judge was a black woman in her 50s, named Judge Patricia Morrison. She reviewed the documents in front of her with a serious expression. Trevor's lead attorney stood up first. His name was Mr. Caldwell, and he spoke with the kind of smooth confidence that came from years of practice. Your Honor, this is an unfortunate family dispute that has been blown out of proportion. My client made some errors in judgment, yes, but there was no criminal intent. Mrs. Hudson had previously given her son access to her accounts for legitimate purposes. The withdrawals were made with the understanding that this was family money, resources that would eventually pass to him anyway. Judge Morrison looked up. Family money, Mr. Caldwell. Are you suggesting that adult children have a right to their parents' bank accounts simply because they expect to inherit someday? Not a right, Your Honor, but an understanding within the family dynamic. My client was helping manage his mother's finances, which she had requested assistance with given her age, and— Stop right there, Judge Morrison interrupted. Mrs. Hudson is 60 years old, employed, and by all accounts mentally competent. What exactly are you implying about her age? Mr. Caldwell backtracked quickly. I'm simply saying that there was a mutual agreement, a family arrangement that— Where is the documentation of this mutual agreement? The judge asked. Any written authorization, any power of attorney, it was a verbal understanding, Your Honor. I see. And the credit cards opened in Mrs. Hudson's name, was that also part of this verbal understanding? Mr. Caldwell hesitated. My client denies opening those credit cards. Miron stood up. Your Honor, if I may, we have documentation from both credit card companies showing the applications were submitted online using Mrs. Hudson's personal information. The IP address traces back to the defendant's home. The cards were mailed to the defendant's address, not Mrs. Hudson's, and all charges on those cards were made by the defendant and his wife. Judge Morrison looked at Trevor. Mr. Hudson, did you open credit cards in your mother's name? Trevor stood up slowly. His voice was quiet. Yes, Your Honor, but I intended to pay them off. I had investments that were supposed to pay out. They didn't work out as planned. So you committed identity theft and fraud because your investments didn't work out. I didn't think of it as, she's my mother. You thought what? That her credit was yours to use, that her identity was yours to borrow. Trevor didn't answer. Judge Morrison turned to me. Mrs. Hudson, would you like to make a statement? I stood up, my legs unsteady. Miron had prepared me for this, but now that the moment was here, I felt exposed, vulnerable. Your Honor, I worked 2 jobs for 30 years to raise my son alone. I gave him everything I had. I never asked for anything in return except respect and basic honesty. When he asked me to transfer all my money to his account, I knew something was wrong. So, I tested him. I sold my furniture to see how he would react, and he reacted with rage, with threats. He told me a woman my age alone without family could end up in a bad way. My voice cracked slightly, but I continued. I didn't know until I went to the bank that he'd already been stealing from me, that he'd taken $17,000 over 6 months, that he'd opened credit cards in my name and spent $23,000. Money I earned cleaning hotel rooms and offices. Money I saved for my future, for my security. I looked at Trevor. He couldn't meet my eyes. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because what he did was wrong. And because if I don't stand up for myself, who will? Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Hudson. You may sit down. She looked at the documents again, then at Trevor. Mr. Hudson, the evidence against you is substantial. Bank records, credit card applications, IP addresses, witness statements. You accessed your mother's accounts without authorization. You forged her signature on documents. You opened credit in her name and used it for personal expenses. These are serious crimes. Trevor's lawyer started to speak, but the judge held up her hand. I'm going to continue this hearing for 2 weeks to allow both parties to explore a settlement. Mr. Hudson, I strongly suggest you consult with your attorneys about resolving this matter. Because if we proceed to trial, you're facing not just civil liability but potential criminal charges, identity theft, fraud, elder financial abuse. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Trevor whispered. Mrs. Hudson, are you open to settlement discussions? I looked at Miron. He leaned over and whispered, It's your choice. We can push for trial if you want. I thought about it. about dragging this through months of legal proceedings, about the emotional toll, about the money it would cost in legal fees. "I'm open to settlement," I said, "if the terms are appropriate." "Good. Both parties will have 2 weeks to negotiate. We'll reconvene on April 18th. Court is adjourned." Outside the courtroom, Trevor tried to approach me. Miron stepped between us. "No contact with my client unless it's through legal counsel." Trevor looked past Miron at me. "Mom, please. Can we just talk? Just for a minute." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "You stole from me. You committed fraud. You threatened me. Whatever you want to say, you can say it through your lawyers." I walked away, Mrs. Bertha linking her arm through mine for support. The settlement negotiations took place over the next 2 weeks in Miron's office. I wasn't required to be there for most of it. Miron and Trevor's lawyers went back and forth exchanging offers and counteroffers. Trevor's first offer was insulting. He would pay back the $17,000 from my bank account over 5 years with no interest, nothing for the credit card debt, nothing for damages, nothing for my legal fees. "He's testing you," Miron said when he called to tell me. "Seeing if you'll accept crumbs because he's your son." "What do you want to do?" "Reject it," I said without hesitation, "and tell them if they don't come back with a serious offer, we're going to trial. And I'm pushing for criminal charges." Miron's voice held a note of satisfaction. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." The second offer came 3 days later. $17,000 repayment over 3 years. He would take responsibility for the credit card debt but wanted it structured as a personal loan to him rather than fraud restitution. Still, nothing for damages or legal fees. "Still insulting," Miron said. "He's trying to avoid any language that admits wrongdoing. If it's a loan, he can claim it was a family arrangement gone wrong. If it's restitution, it's an admission of theft. What should I ask for? Everything. Full repayment of the $17,000 plus the $23.00 credit card debt. Compensation for damages, let's say $5,000, all your legal fees. And a written admission of what he did, plus a structured payment plan with penalties if he misses payments. Will they agree to that? If they don't, we go to trial. And the criminal charges move forward. The prosecutor's office is very interested in this case, Diane. Elder financial abuse cases are hard to prove because victims usually won't testify against family. You're willing to. That makes this case strong." I took a deep breath. "Okay. Ask for everything." While the lawyers negotiated, something unexpected happened. Trevor started a social media campaign. It started with a post on his Facebook page. A long, emotional post about how he was being persecuted by his own mother, how he'd tried to help her manage her finances out of concern for her well-being, how she'd turned on him, filed false charges, was trying to ruin his life. The post talked about toxic parents, about adult children who had to set boundaries, about the pain of being attacked by the person who was supposed to love you unconditionally. It was carefully written, just vague enough to avoid legal issues but clear enough that anyone who read it would sympathize with him. Poor Trevor, victimized by his cruel, ungrateful mother. The post got hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, people sharing their own stories of difficult parents, people praising Trevor for speaking his truth, people offering him support and encouragement. Mrs. Bertha showed it to me. I read it sitting in my mostly empty living room, feeling a cold rage settle in my chest. "He's lying," Mrs. Bertha said, outraged. "He's telling everyone you're the problem. That you're, what's that word, gaslighting him." "Let him," I said quietly. "Let him, Diane. He's destroying your reputation. He's destroying his own case." Miron says anything Trevor posts publicly can be used as evidence, and he's admitting in this post that he had access to my finances. That's helpful to us. Still, it hurt. Seeing my son paint himself as the victim. Seeing strangers who knew nothing about our situation condemn me based on his lies. Some of them found my minimal social media presence and left comments. Some said I deserved to be alone, that Trevor was better off without me. I stopped reading after a while, stopped checking. It didn't matter what strangers thought. What mattered was the truth, and the truth was documented in bank records and credit reports. Trevor's third settlement offer came 1 week before our court date. It was better, much better. Full repayment of $17,000. Acknowledgement of the credit card debt of $23,000 which he would pay directly to the credit card companies. $5,000 damages, my legal fees covered. A payment plan of 6 months with strict penalties for missed payments, but still no written admission of wrongdoing. His lawyers insisted on language that made it sound like a family dispute rather than fraud. They're afraid of the criminal charges, Miron explained. If he admits to fraud in writing, the prosecutor can use that. They want to settle the civil case in a way that makes the criminal case harder to pursue. What do you think I should do? That depends on what you want. Do you want your money back, or do you want him to face criminal consequences? Because we might not get both. I thought about it for a long time, about what justice meant, about what I needed to move forward. I want my money back, I said finally, and I want a written statement that he acknowledges the facts of what happened. Not an admission of fraud necessarily, but an acknowledgement that he took the money without permission, that he opened the credit cards without my knowledge, that he's repaying me because he took what wasn't his. I can work with that, Miron said. The final negotiation session happened in person. Both legal teams, Trevor, Vanessa, me, and Miron. We sat in a conference room at Miron's office on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Trevor looked terrible, thinner than I'd seen him, dark circles under his eyes. Vanessa looked angry and defensive, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. The lawyers hammered out the final language of the settlement agreement. Trevor would repay the full $17,000 plus $5,000 damages within 6 months. He would pay the $23,000 credit card debt directly to the companies over 12 months. He would cover all my legal fees. And he would sign a statement acknowledging that he had accessed my bank accounts and withdrawn $17,000 without my explicit permission, that he had opened credit cards in my name without my knowledge or consent, and that he was making these payments as restitution for his actions. The statement stopped short of using words like theft or fraud, but the facts were clear. It was enough. If we agree to this, Trevor's lawyer said, the criminal charges are dropped. The decision to pursue criminal charges is up to the prosecutor, not my client, Miron said. But if this settlement is fulfilled completely and on time, Mrs. Hudson will inform the prosecutor that she considers the matter resolved and doesn't wish to pursue criminal charges. Trevor looked at me for the first time since we'd entered the room. Mom, I said quietly. Don't say anything. Just sign the papers. Make the payments, and stay away from me. His face crumpled slightly, but he nodded. We all signed. The settlement was official. The first payment arrived in my account exactly on the specified date, 1 week after we signed the settlement. $2,833.33, the first installment of the $17,000, plus damages divided over 6 months. I stared at the notification on my phone, feeling something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not relief, just emptiness. This money earned from my years of hard work stolen by my son and now returned through legal force. It felt tainted somehow, heavy. Mrs. Bertha came over that evening with sweet tea and her famous pecan pie, so he paid. Good, first step, 5 more to go. She cut us each a slice of pie. How are you feeling? I don't know, I admitted. I thought I'd feel better. Vindicated. But I just feel tired. That's normal, honey. You've been fighting for months. Your body and your heart need time to catch up with what your head knows is right. Over the next few weeks, Trevor's social media presence changed. The post about being victimized by his toxic mother disappeared. In its place was a new post carefully worded by his lawyers acknowledging that he had made serious errors in judgment regarding his mother's finances and that he was taking steps to make amends. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission of fraud. But it was something. And the comments changed too. Some people praised him for taking accountability. Others expressed disappointment. Many just disappeared, moving on to the next drama. I deleted my minimal social media accounts entirely. I didn't need to see any of it anymore. The credit card companies received Trevor's first payments. My credit report, which had been destroyed by the fraudulent accounts, slowly began to recover as the debts were marked as disputed and under resolution. Sarah from the bank called to check on me. Mrs. Hudson, I just wanted to see how you're doing. I've been thinking about you. I'm okay, I said. The settlement came through. He's making payments. That's wonderful. Not many people in your situation have the courage to follow through like you did. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like survival. That's what courage is, Sarah said. Doing what needs to be done, even when you're terrified. 2 months into the payment plan, I made a decision. I couldn't stay in Charleston anymore. Every street, every corner, every familiar place held memories I didn't want to carry anymore. I started looking at real estate listings. Small towns along the South Carolina coast, places where nobody knew me, where I could start fresh. I found a small house in a town called Edisto Beach, about an hour and a half south of Charleston. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small yard. Nothing fancy, but it had a screened porch that faced the marsh, and the listing photos showed the most beautiful sunsets I'd ever seen. The house cost $180,000. I had the money. Between my savings in my new protected account, the settlement payments coming in, and what I'd saved from selling my furniture, I could pay cash. I made an offer that same day. Mrs. Bertha cried when I told her. I understand, honey, I do, but I'm going to miss you something fierce. You can visit, I said, anytime you want. There's a guest room. I will. And you better believe I'll be checking on you regularly. Making sure you're eating right, and not spending all your time alone. The 3rd payment from Trevor arrived on time, then the 4th. Each payment felt like a small weight lifting, not because of the money itself, but because it meant he was following through, that there were consequences, that actions had meanings. I closed on the house in Edisto Beach on a Tuesday morning in July. The settlement was 4 months in with 2 payments left to go. I hired a moving company to take what little I still owned. Most of what I'd sold I didn't replace. I didn't need much. A bed, a small table, a comfortable chair, some dishes, some books. I left behind the house where I'd raised Trevor, where I'd worked myself to exhaustion, where I'd sacrificed and struggled and poured everything into a son who saw me as a resource to be exploited. The drive to Edisto Beach took just under 2 hours. I watched Charleston disappear in my rearview mirror, feeling something shift inside me. Not quite peace, not yet, but possibility. The house was perfect. Small, manageable mine, in a way nothing had been mine before. I spent the first week just settling in, arranging furniture, planting flowers in the little yard, sitting on the screened porch watching the marsh grass wave in the breeze. My neighbors were kind but not intrusive. They waved when they saw me, brought over a welcome casserole, but they didn't pry, didn't ask about my life before. I was just Diane, the new woman in the yellow house on Palmetto Street. The 5th payment arrived while I was sitting on my porch drinking morning coffee. I watched the sunrise paint the marsh in shades of pink and gold, feeling something I hadn't felt in decades. Contentment. Not happiness exactly. The wound was still too fresh for that. But contentment. A quiet sense that I was exactly where I needed to be. Mrs. Bertha called that afternoon. "How's paradise?" "It's good," I said. "Quiet, peaceful. You sound different already." "I feel different. That boy of yours, he's still making payments, like clockwork. 1 more to go. And then what?" "And then I'm free," I said. "Really free. For the first time in 32 years. 3 weeks later, Trevor tried to contact me. Not through lawyers this time. A direct email to my new email address that somehow he'd found. The subject line read, "Please, Mom." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Mom, I know you said to stay away. I've tried, but I can't stop thinking about what I did, about how I hurt you, about everything I took from you. I'm in therapy now, real therapy, trying to understand how I became someone who could do that to his own mother. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I finally understand what I did. What I took from you wasn't just money. It was trust, safety, the belief that your own child would protect you instead of prey on you. I took that, and I can't give it back no matter how many payments I make. The last payment will be in next week. After that, I'll leave you alone like you asked. But I wanted to say this one time, I'm sorry, Mom. And I hope someday you find peace. Trevor. I read the email 3 times, looking for manipulation, for hidden agendas, for the lies he'd told so easily before. But all I found was exhaustion and regret. Maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't. Maybe he'd changed. Maybe he was just saying what he thought I wanted to hear. It didn't matter anymore. Because whether his apology was genuine or not, whether his therapy was working or not, whether he actually understood what he'd done or not, none of it changed the fundamental truth. I had closed that door. Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation. Out of love for myself that I'd learned too late, but not too late to matter. I didn't respond to the email. I simply archived it and went back to my porch, my coffee, my sunrise. The 6th and final payment arrived on a Wednesday morning in late August, $2,833.33. The last installment of the $17,000 plus $5 0 inches damages. I sat on my porch watching the notification appear on my phone. It was done. The civil settlement was complete. Trevor had paid everything he owed for the bank account theft and damages. The credit card payments would continue for another 6 months, but those went directly to the companies. I wouldn't see them, wouldn't track them. They were between Trevor and the credit card companies now. I called Miron to let him know. Congratulations, Diane. He fulfilled the agreement. That's actually rare in cases like this. A lot of people stop paying once the pressure is off. What happens now? Now you inform the prosecutor that the settlement has been satisfied and you don't wish to pursue criminal charges. The prosecutor can still choose to move forward independently, but without your cooperation as a victim they probably won't. So he gets away with it. No criminal record, he has a civil judgment against him. That's public record. It'll show up on background checks. And Diane, you got your money back. You got damages. You got a written acknowledgement of what he did. That's more than most victims of family financial abuse ever see. I know. You're right. You want him to hurt the way he hurt you, Miron said gently. That's natural, but criminal charges wouldn't do that. They'd just drag you both through more months of legal proceedings, more stress, more pain. You've already won, Diane. You protected yourself. You got justice. Don't give him any more of your life. He was right. I knew he was right. I called Detective Richards and informed her that the civil settlement had been completed and I didn't wish to pursue criminal charges. I understand, she said. For what it's worth, Mrs. Hudson, what you did took incredible courage. Most people in your situation just accept the abuse. You stood up for yourself. That matters. With that final call, it was truly over. The legal battle, the settlement, the constant stress of court dates and lawyer meetings and payments to track. Over. I sat with that feeling for a while. The absence of fight. The space where fear and anger and hurt had been. Mrs. Bertha visited that weekend, driving down from Charleston with her daughter who wanted to see the beach. Look at you, she said, standing on my porch looking at me with approval. You got color in your cheeks. You got light in your eyes. This place is good for you. It is, I agreed. I didn't realize how heavy everything was until I put it down. We spent the afternoon on the beach walking along the water's edge collecting shells. Mrs. Bertha's daughter asked how I was adjusting to retirement. I'm not retired, I told her. I'm still working at the hotel in town. 3 days a week. It's enough to keep me busy, but not so much that I'm exhausted. After everything that happened, you're still working. She seemed surprised. I like working, I said simply. I like having a routine. Like being useful. I just don't like being taken advantage of. That evening, after they left, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and watched the sun set over the marsh. The sky turned from blue to pink to orange to deep purple. Egrets flew overhead, heading to their roosting spots. The air smelled of salt and pluff, mud, and possibility. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom Trevor's voice. I should have hung up immediately, but I didn't. How did you get this number? I asked Mrs. Bertha. I told her it was an emergency. I'm sorry. I know I said I'd leave you alone, but I needed to tell you something. What the payments are done. The civil settlement is complete, and I wanted you to know that I contacted the prosecutor myself. I told them I committed fraud, that I'm willing to take whatever consequences they decide. I was silent. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Trevor continued, his voice shaking slightly. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying. To be better. To be the person you deserve to have as a son. Trevor, I started, then stopped. What was there to say? Vanessa and I are separated, he said. She couldn't handle the shame of everything that came out. Said I'd ruined her reputation. She filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. She was part of the problem. Encouraged me to see you as someone we could use. Someone who owed us. I see that now. More silence. I'm not calling to make excuses, Trevor said. I'm calling to say thank you. Thank you. For what? For not letting me get away with it. For standing up for yourself. For showing me that actions have consequences. I was on a path, Mom. A bad path. And you stopped me. You saved me from becoming someone even worse. My eyes stung with unexpected tears. Trevor, I didn't do it to save you. I did it to save myself. I know, but you saved me anyway, even if you didn't mean to. I looked out at the darkening marsh at the last streaks of sunset fading into night. I'm glad you're in therapy, I said finally. I'm glad you're trying to change. But Trevor, I meant what I said. I can't have you in my life. Maybe ever. Certainly not now. I understand. Do you really? Because this isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting me. You broke something fundamental. Trust. Safety. The belief that my own child wouldn't hurt me deliberately. I can't unbreak that. And I can't spend whatever years I have left trying to rebuild it. I understand, he said again, quieter this time. I hope you find peace, Trevor. I hope therapy helps. I hope you become a better person. But you need to do that away from me. Okay. His voice cracked. Okay, Mom. Goodbye. Goodbye, Trevor. I hung up. Sat there holding my phone, tears running down my face, not from sadness exactly. From release, from finality, from the absolute certainty that I had done the right thing, even though it hurt. Mrs. Bertha called 10 minutes later. He told me it was an emergency, about a hospital or something. I'm sorry, Diane. I shouldn't have given him your number. It's okay, I said. He needed to say goodbye. Now he has. It's over. Is it really over? I looked out at my small house, my screened porch, my little yard with flowers I'd planted myself, my new life in this quiet town where nobody knew my history or my pain. Yes, I said. It's really over. 6 months passed, then a year, then longer. Life in Edisto Beach settled into a rhythm that felt right. I worked my 3 days a week at the Seaside Inn, cleaning rooms and chatting with guests. The work was the same as it had always been, but somehow it felt different, lighter, because I was doing it for myself now, not out of desperation or sacrifice. I made friends slowly. Clara, who worked at the local library and shared my love of mystery novels. James, who ran the seafood restaurant on the main street and always saved me a table by the window. Margaret, who lived 3 houses down and invited me to her book club. They knew I'd moved here from Charleston. They knew I'd been through something difficult. But they didn't push for details, and I didn't offer them. I was just Diane. Not Diane the victim. Not Diane the single mother. Not Diane whose son stole from her. Just Diane. Mrs. Bertha visited every few months, always bringing news from Charleston and homemade treats. On one visit, about 18 months after I'd moved, she hesitated before telling me something. I saw Trevor last week. At the grocery store. I felt my body tense automatically, then consciously relaxed. How did he look? Different, thinner, older somehow. He was alone. Looked like he was trying not to be seen. Did he say anything? Asked how you were doing? If you were happy? I told him you were doing well, and left it at that. Thank you. He's still in Charleston. Still working at the same company somehow. Lives in a small apartment now. Vanessa took him for everything in the divorce, according to the neighborhood gossip. I felt a small pang of something. Not quite sympathy, not quite satisfaction, just acknowledgement that consequences were real and lasting. I hope he's learning from it, I said. Me too, honey. Me too. I never changed my phone number, though I sometimes thought about it. Trevor never called again after that last conversation, never texted, never tried to reach out through social media or email. He kept his word about leaving me alone, and I found that I was grateful for that, even as part of me wondered if he thought about me, if he regretted what he'd done, if he'd truly changed. But those thoughts came less and less frequently as time went on. My life filled with other things. Better things. I started a small garden in my backyard. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, things that grew easily in the coastal climate. I'd never had time for gardening before, but now I found peace in the simple act of tending plants, watching them grow, harvesting what I'd planted. I took up painting. Terrible paintings at first, awkward and amateurish. But Clara from the library encouraged me to take a class at the community center, and slowly I improved. I painted the marsh at sunset, the beach at dawn, the old live oaks draped with Spanish moss. I hung my paintings in my little house, and they made me happy in a way expensive art never could, because they represented time I'd spent doing something just for me. On my 62nd birthday, 2 years after moving to Edisto Beach, I threw myself a party. Just a small gathering on my porch. Mrs. Bertha drove down. Clara came. James brought fresh shrimp. Margaret brought wine. We ate and laughed and watched the sun set over the marsh, and I realized something profound. I was happy, not content, not just okay, actually happy. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. Wasn't bracing for the next demand, the next crisis, the next sacrifice required of me. I was just living, peacefully, joyfully, freely. "What are you thinking about, Mrs.?" Bertha asked, noticing my expression. "I'm thinking about how I spent 60 years believing that being a good mother meant giving everything, sacrificing everything, accepting everything, and how wrong that was. And what do you believe now? That being a good person means protecting your own dignity, that love shouldn't cost you your peace, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is close a door that needs to be closed." Mrs. Bertha raised her wine glass. To closed doors and new beginnings, we all toasted. And in that moment, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could give them, I felt complete in a way I never had before. The money Trevor paid back sat mostly untouched in my account. I'd used some of it to furnish my house to establish myself in Edisto Beach, but most of it remained earning interest, providing security, not because I was saving it for anything specific, but because having it meant I would never be that vulnerable again, never be that dependent on anyone, never be in a position where my own child could threaten me because I was alone and without resources. I thought sometimes about Trevor's last words to me, about how I'd saved him by not letting him get away with it. I didn't know if that was true, didn't know if he'd actually changed or if he'd just learned to hide his true nature better, but I knew I'd saved myself, and that was what mattered. I learned that saying no is an act of self-love, that setting boundaries is not cruelty, but necessity, that protecting your peace is not selfishness, but wisdom. I learned that you can love someone from a distance, that you can wish them well while also wishing them away from you, that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to choose yourself, never too late to recognize your own worth, never too late to build a life that belongs to you alone. Some people might think I'm bitter, that I should have forgiven Trevor, welcomed him back, given him another chance. That family is family and blood is thicker than water. But those people don't understand what it costs to sacrifice yourself repeatedly for people who see your sacrifice as their due, who take and take and take until there's nothing left of you. I chose differently. I chose me. I chose dignity. I chose peace. And on this evening, sitting on my porch in my little yellow house by the marsh, watching my friends laugh and eat and celebrate a life I'd built from the ashes of the old one, I knew without doubt that I'd made the right choice. This was my victory. Not in the money recovered or in Trevor's punishment, but in the fact that I recovered myself. That I learned my worth wasn't measured by how much I could give or how much I could endure. I closed that door on Trevor not out of vengeance, but out of dignity. And that distinction made all the difference. because it meant I won, not by making him my enemy, but simply by refusing to continue being my own victim. The sun set, completely painting the marsh in shades of purple and deep blue. The marsh grass rustled in the evening breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a night heron called, and I sat there surrounded by true friendship in a home that was truly mine, living a life that was finally completely my own. Trevor taught me that lesson, though not in the way he intended. And for that, in some strange way, I was grateful. Because now I was free. That is Diane Hudson's story. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments below. I love seeing our global community come together over these stories about financial abuse by family adult children who steal from their parents, and the moment when a 60-year-old mother discovers $40,000 stolen from her accounts. Real question. If you were Diane sitting in your kitchen when your son Trevor demanded control of all your money, what would you have done? Would you have said yes and hoped for the best? Would you have confronted him immediately, or would you have done exactly what Diane did and sold all your furniture? To test his reaction, tell me in the comments. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something. Share it if you know someone who's been financially abused by their own children. Someone who worked double shifts for 30 years raising a child alone. Someone who gave up rebuilding their life after divorce because they didn't want their child to have a stepfather. Someone who sacrificed everything only to discover their son stole $17,000 from their bank account and opened $23,000 fraudulent credit cards. And subscribe for more raw, real stories about mothers who fight back against financial elder abuse, sons who face legal consequences for stealing from their parents, lawyers who specialize in protecting victims, and what happens when a woman who cleaned hotel rooms for decades finally chooses herself and moves to a peaceful beach town with the money recovered through justice. Thanks for watching. Sometimes the son who demands control of your finances has already been stealing from you for months. Sometimes selling your furniture is the test that reveals who your child really is. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to hire a lawyer and file charges against your own son. And sometimes the most powerful thing a mother can do is close the door permanently, not out of revenge, but out of self-love and dignity. See you in the next video.